Hello and welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining this Global Investigative Journalism Network webinar, which is a Q&A session about Reporters Shield, a remarkably innovative new service to prevent and fight slaps and other forms of legal intimidation against newsrooms. My name is Rowan Philp, and I'm senior reporter at GIJN, which is the largest support and training network for watchdog journalists around the world. And please do see our remarkable archive of free guides, resources, and tip sheets for investigative reporters at GIJN.org. So the past few years have seen an alarming rise in legal harassment and bullying of newsrooms, specifically lawsuits known as SLAPs, which stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. These are nuisance lawsuits without merit, but which are designed to silence the press with the threat of ruinous financial and time costs. GIJN has described them as a cancer on accountability. So, I think to offer just one example, 130 SLAP suits, separate suits, were filed against the Polish daily Gazeta Wyborcza in just 2 years. That's more than one new lawsuit for one newsroom every single month. According to Attila Biro, the co-founder of Romania's Context at IRO, quote, "We are not above the law as journalists, but these strategic litigations are just meant to drain us. We are using up days of reporting and editing to manage just a single case," close quote. So, there have been several local initiatives to protect newsrooms, but to my knowledge, Reporters Shield is the only global scale solution that offers paid legal assistance to newsrooms. And as we will hear today, that makes a big difference. Today, I'm joined by Clothilde Redfern, Executive Director of Reporters Shield, and Jodi Blankenship, its Project Manager. And we're also joined by our friend Drew Sullivan, co-founder of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, who has been pelted with slap suits like hailstones in the past, and who is also a co-founder of Reporters Shield. For our audience, please send written questions and messages in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many as we can after my own Q&A session with the speakers. And you can start typing your questions right away. And please note that this webinar is being recorded. So Clothilde, before you share your slides on how the service works, can you briefly update us on Reporters Shield's current status and its growth in its very first year? And have you already started helping newsrooms? And in the sense, have you actually defended them in court?
Sure. Thank you so much, Rowan, and thanks to GIJN for hosting us in their webinar series. So Reporters Shield was launched at last year's World Press Freedom Day on May the 3rd. And since then, we've received a huge interest in the program because we had some very welcome support from our donors to help spread the word. In fact, we had the embarrassing problem of a backlog of applications to begin with, because at that time, it was just the startup director, Peter, and Jodi scrambling to keep up. But we've now grown the team. We operate as a distributed team across several time zones. We can process applications in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. And we're now completely on top of incoming interest, which is fantastic. To date, we've actually received 168 applications. All but one have been eligible for support. And the only reason that one single one wasn't eligible for support was because they hadn't quite understood the service. All are at various stages of the application process, which I'll go into in a little while. And 32 investigative journalism organizations have now completed their onboarding and are actively receiving support. 6 of those members have already logged claims against the Mutual Defence Fund that we manage at Reporters Shield. So we didn't expect such a high level of interest. Everyone knows the challenge of launching a new program, making it known, getting through the noise. But of course, there are existing other legal support schemes for journalists, but Reporters Shield is different because it's a paid service, which means you're not at the mercy of a lawyer's availability to deliver pro bono. It also means that we can take care of finding an expert lawyer that understands the growing use of SLAPP suits and is specialized. I think a lot of people end up with general media law defense, which is not always adequate. And so our members come to us because it's the only way to really guarantee legal defense and protect your newsroom from possibly fatal legal costs.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that summary. And to Drew Sullivan, Drew, is this threat growing geographically, and also, what effect can SLAPPs have on newsrooms with no legal resources whatsoever? Oh, you're muted, Drew.
Thank you. It's a huge problem, and the thing is, most of the assistance is after the fact now. You go to organizations and try to get money after you've been sued, and the problem is that really doesn't. You can't make a decision as an editor on whether to run a story or not, because you don't really know. Every time you run a story, it's an existential threat to a newsroom. And what lawyers in the UK have figured out, and in other places, is that they can effectively bully you. I mean, if you've gotten these legal letters from Carter Ruck and Schillings and these types of companies, you know how aggressive they are. And they really want to put pressure on you. And, if they think it's going to be if you will capitulate by suing somebody in 3 or 4 different jurisdictions, they'll recommend it. And so, the problem is that, a lot of the people we're dealing with, organized crime and corrupt governments are often dealing with this enabling industry, the banks, the law firms, the registration agents, and those organizations especially use these types of techniques. So you get into a situation where you expect you're doing a story on some oligarch or some businessman, and they've got a lawyer in London, and they suddenly have world-class legal strategic information to basically give you the biggest problem. And I don't think journalists are really prepared for that. They don't realize the threat. And OCCRP, we have 88 lawsuits against our network now. Last time we counted, it's probably well over 90. And it's because we deal with these types of people. But as more and more journalists deal with these types of people, they'll find that this is an incredible problem. And the real threat here is that journalists are self-censoring. They're basically saying, look, if I don't have the legal support to back me up, I can't run the story, and they'll capitulate, or they'll take the story down. And, we're dealing with some organized crime figures who once had literally thousands of stories written about them, and they've cleaned them all up by going around and threatening people around the world, that they will sue them if they don't take the stories down, and they're getting the stories taken down. And so you'll find precious little against some oligarchs or organized crime figures out there, which just makes them harder and harder for the next person who wants to write about them, because they know what to do.
Yeah, wow, that is a banquet of threats. Clothilde, we'd love to. I think the audience would love to hear about the prevent, respond, defend strategy that's becoming, part of your identity. I wonder if you wanted to go ahead and share some slides and narrate them for us on how it works.
Yes, sure. Happy to do that. So Andrea has our slides. I just want to reassure everyone there's only half a dozen slides, so we won't keep you too long with these, but sometimes visual aids help to clarify communication. So the program itself is a global membership program. The reason it needs to be global is twofold. One is SLAPPs can be brought against you in any jurisdiction where the individual you are accusing in your investigation has legally registered goods. So for example, Paul Radu, who co-founded the OCCRP with Drew, was subjected to a SLAPP for his reporting about money laundering in Azerbaijan. in London, despite the fact that none of the activities he reported on were taking place in London. And the person he accused wasn't registered here, but he had assets in London and was able to use the aggressive UK jurisdiction and legal system. And sadly, the many London law firms who are only too happy to take on this lucrative work to attack Paul. So you need to have a global system because slaps are global and can be, you can be attacked in any jurisdiction where the person you're referring to is registered. Let's go to the next slide, which goes into our three-pronged strategy of support. So prevent, respond, defend are the three ways that your membership of Reporters Shield can protect your newsroom. The preventative action is offering you expert legal risk assessment. So this can take the form of formal pre-publication review by our expert lawyers, particularly if you are publishing stories about actors in the top risk jurisdictions. And then legal risk assessment is a non-binding review to give editors more information about the legal risks that they are taking in whatever whatever report they intend to publish, so that they can make an educated decision about the risks that they're taking. It's important to understand that prevention is key so that the publishers can measure the risk and get advice from expert lawyers. However, the advice isn't binding. At the end of the day, publishers make their own decisions. They are holding, they are holding people to account. And for many of them, that's the purpose, is to have the confidence to publish. But to have access to expert legal review is priceless, really. And in fact, it's that service that has been the most popular with our current members. Response, the response support is about having specialist lawyers respond to formal threats of lawsuits on your behalf. So aggressive letters, bullying tactics, threats of lawsuits, those are the most prevalent form of slaps. Most of the time, the person attacking you with a slap doesn't really want to end up in court. They're just hoping to intimidate you to stop publishing. And we will take the stress out of it for journalists, allow the reporting team to focus on the journalism and respond on your behalf with adequate language that will communicate to the person threatening you that you have experts ready to defend you and you will not be pushed over. The defense is if that's not enough to nip it in the bud and they actually pursue you and do want to take you to court, then we will pay for your legal defense in court. And the cost of legal defense varies a lot between countries. We can cover up to a maximum of legal costs reaching $500,000, but it's actually up to each member to calculate how much cover they need and therefore just pay for what they need. Let's go to the next slide, which explains a bit about our global network of lawyers. So our principal partner in Reporters Shield is the Vance Center for International Justice. They are the pro bono arm of the New York City Bar. Its chief executive, Alex Papachristou, has been working with Drew for many years, and they have developed this program over the last decade, trying to solve the problem of increasing legal attacks. On this slide, you can see the 5 regional legal organizations that are helping us to coordinate the best legal representation for our members. So if you're not familiar with these, ECPMF is based in Germany and covers legal experts against slaps and journalists in most of Europe and Greater Europe, Eastern Europe, where there's very high prevalence. The Pan-African Lawyers Union has experts focusing on media attacks across the African continent. Reviewed and Cleared is a London-based firm where, sadly for me, living in London, we are in the slaps capital of the world, and you need experts because this is one of the most expensive jurisdictions to be taken to court in. Flip is our partner in South America, and Lawyers for Reporters is the North American partner run by the Vance Center. Now, I just want to make it clear that this is us offering you expert advice, but this does not mean you can't use your favorite lawyers. In fact, if you already have a lawyer that knows your news outlet well, that knows your journalistic practices and can defend you in court, all the better. The more they understand about you and how you operate your journalism, the better. But many people come to us and have no idea where to find a suitable lawyer. So we cover both. Next slide, please. So everyone is obviously interested to know what the membership costs are. This is slightly complicated, so I will aim to explain it. This is the innovation and the unique selling point of Reporters Shield. We are a mutual defense fund. This means we are trying to collect as many members as possible to all pay into the mutual defense fund at a level that they can afford, so that whenever you need cover, you can dip into that shared mutual defense fund. This is another reason why the scheme is global. For this to work and be sustainable, it needs to be a large-scale global project. And its sustainability relies on actuarial science. Now, before I started this job 4 months ago, I didn't have a clue what actuarial science is. It's actually a very sophisticated risk management tool, which takes into account mathematical projections, calculations, and the financial costs of risks, which has been used for many years by the insurance industry to make a lot of insurance companies profitable. We are using that same science and that same tool to make sure our fund is, our non-profit fund is sustainable. And the idea is that using this, we will be able to protect the mutual defense fund in perpetuity to pay for its eventual legal costs of our members. Because of this, the pricing for each applicant is different. The average at the moment is between $3,500 a year and $5,000 a year. But I should highlight that our current members are centralized in Eastern Europe and on the African continent. That means they are looking for legal protection in jurisdictions where legal costs are relatively low, particularly compared to the UK or America. Members in the UK or America would end up paying more, probably closer to $10,000 or $20,000 a year, depending on the level of coverage and publishing that they make. So the location of your organization, the number of stories you publish, the proportion of investigative reporting that you're publishing, all of that will inform the pricing of your membership. Let's go to the next slide so I can explain that we know not everyone can afford. So this product was created because media libel insurance at the moment is becoming increasingly difficult and increasingly unaffordable. The scheme was really designed to meet the needs of investigative journalism outlets that don't have access to a lawyer or a budget line for libel insurance. We have tried to make it as affordable as possible, but as I've explained, the sustainability of the model means we need to charge to ensure that incoming membership fees covers outgoing legal costs for our members. So we've looked into various ways that we can help potential members cover their annual membership dues. We can absolutely go through the application process, bring you on board, log you into our membership pool, and then pause and wait for you to be able to start your membership by giving you a no obligation guaranteed quote. This means that you can know exactly how much your membership would cost and take that quote to an existing funder or perhaps a particular donor that you know who would be interested to cover this side of your operational expenses. We can give you templates to help create those funding proposals for any of your supporters. And we also have subsidies available for some countries. So at the moment, the wonderful Swedish government has given us a pot of money to subsidize members' membership fees from ODA countries. That stands for Overseas Development Aid countries. and we can distribute a list, but it's very easy to find online. It's what the Swedish Foreign Aid Department is focusing on, and that's how they're deciding who they are subsidizing. We also have some support we're working on getting subsidies for other countries, particularly local news outlets in North America, and I'm hoping to have some more news on that soon. Let's go to the next slide. The application process. So as I mentioned, our team has grown, and we are on top of all the applications now. So new applicants can have their membership go live in as little as 3 weeks if they have all their due diligence documents to hand. So this can take, as little as 2 days if you're very well organized and you've got the leadership of your outlet behind you, or it can take a bit longer if you don't quite remember where you've logged your statutory registration documents, etc. Why do we need this level of information? Because we have to make absolutely sure that our members are responsible journalism outlets, that they're not unduly influenced by political actors or corrupted money, and to protect the fund that pays for members' legal defense costs. Like I said, we've got this mutual defense fund, and we have to protect it and make sure we only open it up to people, trusted professional journalism outlets. So we have a legal due diligence process, which is just about checking that you're a real organization, you're independent, and you're professionally run. And then we check your journalistic due diligence to make sure that you're not going to open the fund to undue risk by publishing stories that are not fact-checked, or only having one editorial eye on various investigations, etc. For all GIJN members, this process will be there'll be a shortcut through this process, because as a GIJN member, you are already vetted. So this should not be a problem at all. But I just want to explain, we do make absolutely sure that only professional journalism outlets are on boards to protect the fund for the benefit of all our members. Okay, I think that's it. I think the next slide is just the contact details for myself and Jodi, so anybody can reach out to us.
Well, and thank you. And just a very brief follow-up. So it's conceivable then, Clothilde, for a newsroom in, say, Mozambique or somewhere who is eligible might hope for some level of cover for as little as, a personal subscription to the New York Times.
I'm not sure if I would describe it like that. I don't actually know what the New York Times is charging at the moment. There is a floor, but there's a floor for membership of $1,000 a year, which frankly is unbelievably good value. If an applicant was applying to me from Mozambique, I would automatically offer them the 75% discount that is subsidized by the Swedish government. So it's not that we can waive the fees, because we can't, because of the model of how to sustain the Mutual Defence Fund, but we are very well connected and working very hard to get others who can afford it, who want to support investigative journalism, to subsidise said fees, so that the member doesn't have to foot the bill themselves. So that's what we're doing. So yes, so for an applicant from, where did you say, Mozambique?
Yeah, one of my favourite places.
They would automatically qualify for a 75% discount, and we would make absolutely sure that to bring them on board. And in fact, we have various members from the African continent already active.
Then fantastic. And for Drew, I know it's tough for Clothilde or even some of the new members to describe their current cases for legal reasons. So I wondered if you could share a few stories of sort of nightmare legal harassment that some of your newsrooms have faced with these slaps in the past.
Sure, and just on the point on the costs, OCCRP right now pays $168,000 a year in insurance, so if you get into the situation where you actually have lawsuits, insurance just goes up. And that's actually a good deal for us. You know, and and we've spent many more millions out in insurance going out to pay lawyers. So, you know, this is you can get into really difficult problems. I mean, most people think I'm in Mozambique, I'm only going to be sued in Mozambique, but you can be sued in South Africa, you could be sued in London, you could be sued anywhere. And this basically gives you global coverage. So people, you know, say, wow, $1,000 is a lot of money, why should I pay that? It's a steal. You know, it is an absolute steal. And I'm not sure how long we can offer prices that low. It'll really depend on how many people sign up and things like that. But anyway, I mean, you know, lawsuits, you know, we have a lot of cases. You know, it's very common now, you know, like our partner in Serbia, Creek, you know, they have about 15 or 16 cases logged against them. All of them, every single one of them is connected to the president of Serbia. You know, they're his friends, they're his, you know, policemen who work with him, his security detail, his oligarchs that live there. And so this is a conscious decision to try to sue the organization out of business. And, you know, they've been in cases where they were in a case where they simply put news out that that a member of the intelligence branch was surreptitiously recorded talking about corruption. So this was a known thing. It was in a court case. All they did was simply report on this recording. They were sued, and in the hearing, they were not allowed to ask a single question of the other side, and they lost the case, of course. And so, you know, this is a travesty of justice. But it's, you know, it will cost them $2,500, you know, for their lawyer for that time. They will have, you know, a certain amount of costs that they have to pay the court. And this is a real problem, you know. And so these are the types of typical cases that you get. We as you mentioned, or as Clothilde mentioned, you know, we're sued in London. It was actually, Paul didn't even work on the story that Clothilde mentioned. He tweeted the story. And so this was a story for Azerbaijanis in Azerbaijan, but because the member of parliament who sued us, his fat little children went to school in some fancy London, you know, school, you know, he was able to say that he, you know, had standing in the UK. And this is true of almost every powerful business person on earth. They have some standing in the UK or the United States. You know, or Paris or Germany or someplace like that, and they can sue there. And in fact, they sued because Paul simply retweeted something, you know, about the story. And so, you know, this is very typical of the London courts, especially. You know, the UK has forgot that it's no longer a global power, and but their courts believe that they are the courts for the world, and consequently have an expansive view on what issues they will take on. And so they're very happy to take on, you know, court cases, you know, from any, crappy oligarch organized crime figure anywhere in the world. And so these are the types of problems. And the UK is not the only, you know, Australia is even more dangerous. Ireland is more dangerous. Singapore is incredibly dangerous. Any place with kind of the common law court systems are incredibly dangerous. But you know, the other thing is you can be there was a journalist who was sued in every single state in Brazil. It ended up being 138 lawsuits for one story. And these are the types of problems that you can get into, and these are really existential issues. And having been through many, many lawsuits, they take a tremendous amount of time. I mean, I probably spend, you know, as the director of OCCRP, I probably spend 15 to 20% of my time just dealing with lawsuits, you know. And so there's also kind of the stress and you know, I'm not stressed anymore. It's just part of the business. I look at lawsuits, you know, as I look at editing a story. It's just something you got to do. You know, but it does take a tremendous amount of time, and that's what people don't realize. The stress and the time that really preoccupies you, because sometimes you're the only one who can go in there and be in court. And that's the big problem. And if you think it's not going to apply to you, then, you know, you're naive. If you're doing good work, it will apply to you at some point. Somebody will figure it out, and you will suffer these lawsuits. We're becoming increasingly globalized, and this knowledge of lawfare has spread all over the world, and you're going to see more and more and more. We're at the beginning, the cusp of the wave, of these lawsuits. They will get much worse before it gets better, and this is one way to stop it. And quite honestly, you would be silly not to get this insurance. And I speak as a journalist and not the originator of this idea.
Yeah, and as a brief follow-up, Drew, you mentioned Creek in Serbia, and I was just recalling one of my GIJN interviews with Creek, where I seem to recall they mentioned that one of their strategies is to go loud about slaps. That when they field slap attacks, they send a reporter to the court to tell the audience, look, this is what's happening to us. This is this meritless attack that's going on. Is that a helpful strategy that could go hand in hand with this kind of insurance cover?
Every single time it's a different story. You have to assess, in Creek's case, it's the president who's behind this. That makes a lot of sense. In other cases, it's sometimes better to be quiet about it, both from the standpoint of legal issues. If you're in some place like Switzerland, the court really looks down on news coverage. They see it as very ugly. And so you got to, you might want to assess that a little differently. Maybe you go loud, but maybe somebody else goes loud for you. There's a whole strategy behind lawsuits, and that's what those lawyers can help you with. That's the good news is, you can bring your threat to them and they can help you go through and figure out how best to handle it. Because a lot of times the way journalists handle the threat is what gets them sued. They get angry, they say, go to hell, and people feel that there's no other course but to sue them, or they get pissed off at the journalist and they say, well, you're getting yours now, I'm going to sue you. And,
right.
These people often have more money than the journalists have by a substantial amount. And so consequently, you really have to be quite strategic when a threat comes in and not answer right away, but get the best possible advice to figure out how to do that, or you're just I see journalists cutting their own throat all the time with, ego, pride, and just a failure to understand what the issues are in a complex court case.
Yeah, and Clothilde, when we think about insurance, I think we tend to think about risk, and if I have lots of car fender benders, my premiums are going to go up. But my impression is that that's not the case. Shield, that you don't penalize newsrooms for being for really hitting its accountability mark regularly.
Yeah, because we're not an insurance, we're not in the insurance business, we're just borrowing from their sustainability tools. We're not in it to make a profit. In fact, Reporters Shield is registered as a non-profit, a 501c3 in America. We were designed to create a mutual defense fund for the whole community of investigative journalism. And so we understand that if your journalism's any good and you are doing high-level accountability reporting, you will get sued. And so we understand that, and we won't hold it against you. What we will do for the good of the whole membership and for the sustainability of the Mutual Defence Fund is just make sure that people are paying a fair membership dues in accordance to their needs and claims on the Mutual Defence Fund. But just because you're publishing such challenging investigations that, you're lifting the lid on wealthy people whose knee-jerk reaction is to sue you, well, no, we understand that. We're created by and for investigative journalism, so we're on your side and we're here to make sure that you can all be defended. And
okay, and I'm wondering, if you make a mistake in your story, are you still covered? In other words, what do you cover and what do you not cover?
Well, so because that is a very unlikely scenario because of the prevent part of our 3-tier support strategy. So the prevent is legal risk assessment and or pre-publication review. We insist on that for any coverage in the half dozen high risk categories. So Drew mentioned them earlier: the UK, the US, Ireland, Singapore, and Australia. These are all high risk and very expensive. And that's why we insist that you do a legal review. It's for your own good, so that you can publish with confidence an investigation that's legally robust. And therefore, that's why we think this is sustainable, because we know that we have measured the risks by giving you access to legal expertise, so that if you actually do end up in court, you're unlikely to lose. That's our risk calculation.
But just to be clear, I mean, yes, even if you make a mistake, they will defend you to the best of your ability. I mean, obviously, we don't want to we'll try to help you not make a mistake, but we will defend you. The only provision is if you knowingly do a bad story out of corruption or other things like that. If we, have evidence that you are yourself corrupt, then we're not obligated to defend you.
Right.
Yeah, bad actors will be penalized. Good investigative journalists will not.
Right. A question for Jodi Blankenship. Without necessarily having to sort of name the newsroom, I wonder if you could share, some of the day-to-day interactions you have with some of these new members, and are you hearing like a pattern in the problems they face and then the needs they have?
Thank you, Rowan, and thank you to GIJN for hosting this webinar. Right now, the largest interaction that we're having with members is for stories that would benefit from legal review. People are definitely taking advantage of this pre-publication prevent aspect of the program. So as Clothilde says, while members are not required to make these suggested changes given by the lawyers, it's important for the members to understand those level of risks that they're taking when they publish a story. I will say that generally the legal advice has all been taken on board, and those changes have been made. As Drew always says, if there's a story that you're concerned is going to ruffle feathers, that's usually the stories that you're going to have trouble with. So having this team behind you to make sure that you're crossing every T, dotting every I, it's going to ensure a stronger defense, maybe not just if, but when the time comes. We also have handled a number of legal threats. In some cases, a well-written letter from a strong media defense lawyer can shut it down almost right away. But in a few situations, we are moving forward with actual litigation. So overall, we've been finding that when outlets know that there's legal protection and support available to them, it's given them more confidence to stop self-censoring and produce more of these really important public interest stories.
And yeah, those robust legal letters, gosh, I'd love to see a template, like this is the kind of thing you should, just shut these folks up and just stop them in their tracks. But it's such a great peace of mind there. And I guess at this point, I should turn it over to my GIJN colleague, Emily O'Sullivan, to read some of the audience questions from the Q&A. And folks, please do keep writing those questions in there. Over to you,
and Rowan,
Emily.
If I can I make a quick interjection? One of the things about those legal letters that come back from our lawyers to those people, one of the reasons people do slaps is they expect journalists to not be prepared, to not have that kind of legal support. So, this is an intimidation factor back to them. They realize now this is going to be expensive, it's going to be long, it's going to be hairy. And I think that's going to reduce some of the suits that we're going to face as journalists.
Absolutely.
What
are you seeing, Emily?
We have got quite a few good questions, actually. Thanks, everyone, for that. But this one's for Jodi and maybe Clothilde as well. Obviously, you've said about eligibility for organisations being reputable investigative journalism organisations. But do you have any other criteria for eligibility? And, this question specifically asks if for-profit newsrooms are eligible, and there's also a follow-up question whether freelancers can get any support or whether it's just for organizations.
Yeah, those are very good questions. So it's important to know that any newsrooms can apply, whether you're non-profit or for-profit, you are still eligible. We just have a slightly different service for for-profit newsrooms, which is termed a subscription rather than a membership. But that's just so that we can stay in line with our non-profit status. That's all. So yes, absolutely do apply. The other thing that should be understood is that SLAPs, sadly, are there's just a bit of a kind of copycat thing going on where people realize how effective SLAPs have been to limit publishing of reports that their rich individuals wish were not out there. And so they're following suit and doing the same in all sorts of different cases. And this includes non-profit and research entities that are not considered journalism outlets, but publish reports on, say, labor rights or environmental abuse, environmental rights, employment rights, all sorts of human rights related issues that are often pointing fingers at the extractive industries or corruption or politicians and organized crime. So these outlets will also benefit. So for example, we have a chapter of Transparency International that is included in our membership, and others in that ilk that do a lot of reporting but are not would not be considered classic journalism outlets. They are very welcome to join, and in fact, the larger the membership, the more sustainable it will be. So we are open to anyone who is subjected to SLAPs for the investigations that they publish.
And as of right now, we are not covering freelancers. However, if a freelancer, their work is published through a member, they would be covered. So we have 3 that I can think of right now, members who specifically joined in order to be able to help protect their freelancers. So if that's something that you would like to discuss as a freelancer, let us know. We can work with you and some of these publishers that you're working with. I think the biggest eligibility requirement is distinguishing between opinion and news reporting. We're looking for legally registered organizations who are doing strong news reporting.
Great, thank you. And this is a more general question, but have you successfully defended any cases since the fund has been launched? That's, any standout cases that you'd be able to share with people?
So it's so new that the two claims for actual defense in court that are happening at the moment have not yet concluded. So they're still going through the courts, and we expect to be able to close on those and bring you back an interesting win story. But at the moment, because they're still in process, I can't divulge, and I don't know how it's going to roll out. But we're quite confident. I mean, like I said, a lot of the time SLAPs are an intimidation tactic put into place by someone who isn't worried about the costs or is assuming that you will capitulate. But if you're a member of Reporters Shield, you don't have to capitulate. You can publish. You can be sure that you've, like Jodi said earlier, crossed the T's, dotted the I's, had legal risk assessment of your investigation, and go ahead and publish, which is very much what we want to encourage.
Yeah, and Emily, one question I noticed on a parallel channel for Clothilde was, what are the different legal considerations based on regions? Sort of are there particular countries in Africa or Latin America which pose, greater SLAP challenges?
So I'm not a SLAPs expert. I am learning a lot every day about all the different risk areas. I do know, for example, that, Drew just mentioned that a journalist in Brazil had been taken to court in every different state in Brazil. I also know that in every state in America has a different SLAP statute. So it's the complexity of SLAPs that makes it difficult for newsrooms to manage on their own. And it's to address that complexity that Reporters Shield was created, and that we've partnered with the Vance Centre that has this existing 2 decades worth of working with lawyers all around the world to make sure that we can get you the right support that you need when you need it, because you really do need somebody who understands the jurisdiction where you are being taken to court. It's different in each case, and that's why it's so complex.
I had another question for Drew, unless I'm preempting you, Emily, where, I'm wondering if the ridiculousness of the damages sought is another form of slap, in the sense, the GIJN's member, Malaysia Kini, was sued for $53 million for simply covering the corruption trial of a politician there.
Yeah, this is an important point too to make about Reporter Shield. One thing about Reporter Shield is it does not cover judgments. So it covers your lawyers. It gives you a good chance to basically defend yourself and win. And in investigative reporting, to be honest, most of the times, if it's done well, you spend 9 months working on a story, you don't really have to worry about losing the case. You just have to worry about defending the case. Although in some jurisdictions you lose it. We can't help on the judgments, and judgments are often, you will often see these gaudy kind of numbers. We're dealing with a businessman who typically sues for $1 billion. Every time he sues, which is all the time, he sues for $1 billion. But courts are pretty smart about that, and they realize most of the time, you have to prove in court that you've actually been damaged to this amount. So it's more, again, an intimidation, factor. If you're in a bad jurisdiction where you've got corrupt, judges, you can actually lose one of those cases and see those kind of large judgments. But that's something that's beyond, anything that's in journalism right now. I mean, we Reporter Shield is going to help in a lot of these cases, but it can't prevent all of these cases, and it can't prevent, a really concentrated effort to put you out of business. It'll give you a lot of support and a lot of lawyers and a lot of time, but we're still in a situation where we're dealing with people who have billions of dollars, and they're going to the situation is extreme. Reporter Shield will defend you all the way up in Europe to the Court of Human Rights and all those types of things, the maximum appeals you can have, but in the end, this is the first kind of systemic solution to this problem. The hope is that Reporter Shield can grow over time to become more robust, to be able to cover, or at least maybe ensure, judgments, later on, with through another insurance company or things like that. But we have to get, to the point where, we've got a reserve fund that's big enough that we can kind of support and protect these things. In the end, we're still in trouble no matter what system we have.
Yeah. Well, that's a great. You reminded me of something I'd wanted to ask Clothilde, which what is that in terms of scale? How many members do you think you need to really to have this be that global solution that everyone turns to?
Well, so we're very lucky that we've had such keen interest from donors that we have a sort of 4 or 5 year runway. So we know we're protected for that duration. At the end of the day, the sustainability of the Mutual Defence Fund is going to rely probably on a mixture of membership annual dues and continued donor support. I think if we were going to be able to make it sustainable just from membership annual dues, we probably need 500 plus members. But at the moment, because people understand how important this is to basically stop the potential legal fatal threat of legal costs and ensure that investigative newsrooms stay open despite being sued, there is a lot of support for us. So, in the short term, we really want 200 plus members. In the long term, we want 500 plus and more. The thing about Mutual Defence Fund is the bigger it is, the more everyone is protected.
And I was also thinking of the sinister element, in the sense that, Drew, can slaps sometimes be precursors to even worse forms of harassment? And I'm thinking of course, Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was hit with almost 50 libel suits before she was eventually murdered in Malta. Can these be the canary that shows you, wow, there's these guys aren't going to stop?
Yeah, it's already happening like that. And besides Daphne, we've got a number of partner organizations where this is the case. Anytime you have a state actor involved, anytime you have an oligarch or a serious organized crime figure, these figures have a tremendous amount of resources that are available to them. And yes, it's usually part of a larger concentrated effort, which could be threats from the government. Often organized crime can get various branches of government to do things. Creek has had tax authorities come in. We're under a tax review in one of the countries that we're in, which is a form of harassment. And so it's often part of kind of a concentrated effort. The problem is that those things we can safety, we can hide people, government harassment, we can make a big issue on it, but legal harassment often is seen with a certain credibility by donors. So if you're being sued, donors kind of say, well, I hope your journalism was good, we'll let the courts decide. And that's the problem. So even though it's a form of harassment, it's not seen as a form of harassment by people because it's somebody's day in court to be able to show why you were wrong. And journalists are sometimes wrong. I mean, the whole point of these lawsuits is it's a balance to journalists going too far. And so, it is a legitimate, and OCCRP has sued, other propaganda publications who have written about OCCRP, so we use this technique ourselves. So it's a legitimate tool. And that's what makes it more dangerous because, ultimately it is at 2 to 5 to 8 years in court. And some of these suits can take up to a decade, where you argue all this out until you finally figure out whether you were actually reasonable journalists or whether you had made a mistake.
Yeah. And okay, and that pivots to this the point for Clothilde on the prestige element. I mean, do some members or might some members disclose or state the fact that their membership in Reporters Shield so that folks know there's solidarity and organization behind their defense?
Yeah, I know of the wonderful African outlet called New Narratives, who are very proud of their membership and have posted our logo on their homepage to let everyone know that their journalism is considered professional and they've passed their due diligence process to become a member of Reporters Shield and will therefore be defended if anyone dares to, attack them with a kind of slap suits or other vexatious lawsuit. We have left it to the discretion of the members whether they want to divulge their membership or not. So it really is up to them. I think it really depends on the kind of reporting that you do and the country that you are based in and how you're registered, if you're working in exile or if you're working within the country that you're investigating. And it can represent a cool, a sort of detracting people from attacks, but it can also make people think, oh, they've got money behind them, let's sting them for it. So I think it's really based on the member, and we're letting them choose which way they choose to go and how much they want to communicate about it.
And a follow-up, another question I saw on Slack was, any other elements that make Reporters Shield different from other legal defense programs?
Well, the biggest difference is that you pay for the legal service we provide through your membership fee, and therefore we can guarantee paid legal defense. There are lots of other legal assistance programs for journalism, thank goodness, because there is a lot of need and we all need to work together and complement each other. But you do not want to be at the mercy of a lawyer's availability to deliver pro bono when you're being attacked with a slap suit. And also, you don't want to have to be left scrambling around looking for money or cutting costs by employing any sort of general media lawyer who often might say that they know how to handle a slap case, but slap cases are very complex, as I've mentioned before, and you really want an expert referral to defend you.
Right.
And just to be clear, Rowan, if you're sued in London, you will not get a pro bono attorney. If you're sued in the United States, you will not likely get a pro bono attorney. They don't cover, huge law cases that are going to take, 2 to 3 years. So this whole concept of there's all these pro bono attorneys out there waiting to help you, it's just not true. We get, attorneys, but it's usually, we get pro bono attorneys, but it's to look at what this law says, or it's to register something for us, or it's something small that they can brag about, but doesn't take a lot of their time. They're not going to take on a huge lawsuit.
With just 10 minutes left of our time, I got a couple of questions left. Emily will let us know if she has any further. One question I had, probably for Drew, is, I noticed that we've seen in countries like Poland that slaps have targeted, journalism areas you'd never expect, like theater reviews and nature conservation features. Is this a trend or even a strategy from these bad actors?
Absolutely. I mean, our societies are in a more aggressive societies, and you saw in the last elections in the United States that it spawned hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits, and I think we are in the litigious time frame where every time you're unhappy with somebody, if you've got the money, you're going to just sue them rather than try to discuss it and figure out a solution or deal with it. And so, that's the world we live in.
Yeah, and of course, there's the broader lesson for journalists that it's always the caption that gets you, right, or the blurb. It's never the headline.
Yeah, and it's because people don't spend the time doing it, and actually, it's also the social media, because you go through all this fancy vetting and editing, and then you have some intern put out 23 things on TikTok and X, and then that's what gets you sued. So it's very difficult. And even in these conversations, I mean, all this information is out there. I assume this is being taped, and it goes online to your website, and some lawyer someday is going to look up to see if Drew Sullivan said anything about the client, to see if we can use it in a lawsuit. So you really, it's with so much information out there and so many tools to find that information, and even AI that's dreaming up some things that you might have said, you've got plenty of space to be sued. And unfortunately, this is a growth industry. We're seeing the numbers go up. It hasn't plateaued. It hasn't, so we can expect this to continue to be a problem for years to come.
Yeah. Well, I think our last question is this one that I've heard, which was for the panel. If you yourself as a newsroom have been defamed by the target of your investigation as a liar or a spy for a foreign government or something like that as part of their harassment, is it possible or advisable to sue them back for defamation?
So I mean, we've had to make this decision a couple times, and the issue is always, anytime you go into court, you never know what's going to happen. We've had some, we had a lawsuit recently where the judge admitted everything in our story was absolutely correct, but we still defamed, the person. And this is, this is becoming a problem, where courts just have a serious problem with the concept of defamation and what it actually is. And so, you have to make a decision whether it's worth your time and effort. Anytime you engage in this kind of conflict, there has to be a reason for doing it. So we're extremely strategic about that. So we go through a series of things and say, how does this help us? What's likely to happen here? What are the downsides? And we make a decision talking to our lawyers and talking to others. You're not going to get any pro bono support, so you're paying out of pocket to sue somebody. Yes. But it may be, in the interest of your organization to do that. Again, it's a strategic decision, and you have to have a fairly sophisticated, legal strategy nowadays if you're a news organization.
Yeah. Well, lastly from me, Clothilde, is there anything I've forgotten to ask? Any point that I've forgotten to ask about this extraordinary service?
Well, I just wanted to include that within the onboarding of all our members, we do give them some essential training, and we're trying to grow the resources that we have available to members all the time. One thing I have learned personally is that a judge is not interested in what you meant when you wrote your report, what the journalist meant in the use of their language, and that there is legal connotations for particular language. And I didn't know this, and I thought that was really interesting. So there is definitely a real need for journalists, editors, and publishers to understand the legal implications of the language used in reporting, and that's something we can help with. So yeah, we're definitely trying to create a very holistic support for our members in any area of their legal needs. And because we're so well connected with the legal defense world of journalists, even if your legal need is not immediately relevant to the membership criteria, we're very happy for you to ask us about it. And usually we can refer you to somebody who can help.
Right. Well, then thank you. And folks, we've reached the end of our time. So I'd like to thank our distinguished speakers and our audience. Our next GIJN webinar will be on October the 1st and will focus on the US election, specifically how to investigate election certification threats and voter disenfranchisement plots. So please do look out for our registration post for that event and sign up. And we invite you and then all of you to visit reportersshield.org and its member application page, of course, and to find more tips and resources by entering SLAP into the search box on GIJN.org. We've got some great resources there also. So thanks again, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.